All right, so we're going to be jumping back to the heart, which is part of the cardiovascular system. Kind of took it aside from the cardiovascular system, talk about the immune and the lymphatic systems. But as we know, the cardiovascular system includes the blood that we've talked about, as well as our heart and our blood vessels. We're going to talk about the heart today and finish it next week, and then be able to jump in on the blood vessels, the last part of our cardiovascular system, hopefully next week as well. Our heart is the main muscle responsible for pumping deoxygenated blood to our lungs and oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. Must beat constantly to circulate blood through our body's blood vessels so those body cells can receive the nutrients and remove the waste or exchange materials with them. To accomplish this, and this is very cool statistics here, these are some cool statistics, heart must beat about 100,000 times a day. Adds up to about 35 million beats per year. Over a year, or over a lifetime, 2.5 billion beats. And you think about it, most of us are only going to have one heart. So hopefully you're treating it well. And what you guys do now will affect your heart later on. I promise you that. Structurally, it is composed of 4 chambers, each serving a specific purpose. There are 2 upper or superior chambers we call the atria. Atria is plural form for atrium. There's a right and a left atrium, separated by a wall known as the interatrial septum. We call these the receiving chambers because their job is to receive blood coming back to the heart. Okay, you can see from our figure here on the previous page, this is actually from a real cadaver heart. Over here would be the right atrium. This is the right auricle, which is an ear-like flap. Associated with it, over here would be the left atrium, which you can see the left auricle, the other ear-like flap, which are going to allow for extra little bit of blood flow to fill those 2 chambers. Okay. Blood flows into those by way of veins. From there, they pump the blood into the lower chambers, which make up the majority of the heart, which we call the ventricles. These are the pumping chambers that pump the blood out of the heart into our 2 different circulations. Our pulmonary circulation, which receives blood from the right side of the heart, so our right ventricle, that carries the blood to our lungs to pick up the oxygen, and then our left ventricle pumps blood into our systemic circulation, which carries blood to everything else to deliver that freshly oxygenated blood. Associated with both ventricles are internal ridges called trabeculae carneae that help aid in blood propulsion, so it increases its ability to pump and makes it pump harder. We've talked since really the last couple weeks and earlier in the semester about muscle. Okay. We learned previously that your heart is basically a muscle, and that muscle makes up the thicker part, or the thickest of the 3 layers of our heart, what we call the myocardium, where myo means muscle. It's not the only layer. There's also an epicardium on the outside that surrounds our heart and lubricates it, and then an endocardium which lines it and actually is continuous with the endothelium of our blood vessels, which we'll talk about in our next lecture. Surrounding our heart is a pericardium, or pericardial sac, as we like to call it, to protect and surround the heart. The inner layer of it is the epicardium that was just mentioned. The outer layer is the fibrous pericardium, and it is made up of tough, inelastic, dense, irregular connective tissue. Between the 2 layers is a very thin space or cavity called the pericardial space cavity, full of a fluid called pericardial fluid. Okay. Associated with our heart are 2 large, or not 2, but several large or great vessels that either carry blood away or to the heart. Generally, arteries, you can think of as a way, always carry almost anyways oxygenated blood. There is an exception to that rule, and that's your pulmonary trunk and pulmonary arteries, which carry deoxygenated blood. Okay. Veins, which generally carry blood to the heart, carry deoxygenated blood. The only exception to that rule are your pulmonary veins, which carry blood back to the left atrium from your lungs. You've got 2 vena cavas, superior and inferior. You could actually go back to that first page and see the superior pretty easily. It's going to be right in here. This one actually right there dumps into the right atrium. There's another one from below, an inferior vena cava. You can't really see it. I guess it's been cut away. And But those are veins. They carry deoxygenated blood. Okay. Associated with your heart is also your largest artery, the aorta, which is the major artery of our systemic circulation, okay, which is the circulation for everything except for your lungs, that is. Okay. If you compare the atria and the ventricles, you'll see that they are very, very different in size. And you can compare the two sides of the heart. Each chamber is going to vary in its thickness of the myocardium based on its function. Atria don't have to be very thick because they don't pump very far. They pump blood through some valves into the ventricles, so they're thin-walled. The ventricles are much thicker. Okay. If you look at the two ventricles, though, you'll find that they are very different in their size. Okay, the left ventricle, which we can see over here at the bottom of our page on the right side of our image, is 4 times thicker than our right ventricle. Why? Because your right ventricle is only pumping blood from your heart to your lungs. Very short distance, and it does so under very little resistance. There's very little pressure that it has to exceed to pump blood into your lungs. Your right ventricle your left ventricle, on the other hand, pumps blood against high pressures into a whole bunch of blood vessels. And you can see that with the last bullet there. It pumps blood through an estimated 75,000 miles of blood vessels, equivalent to traveling around the Earth's equator 3 times. That's an incredible statistic. Hopefully you guys appreciate just how amazing that is. The other figure on this page shows the difference between the pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation. You'll see here in blue. Blue always indicates deoxygenated blood. Always involves the right side of the heart, pumping blood from the right ventricle into the pulmonary arteries to your lungs to pick up the oxygen. Pulmonary arteries are the only arteries that carry deoxygenated blood. Pulmonary veins are the only veins carrying oxygenated blood back to the left atrium and then out through the left ventricle into the aorta is where the blood will eventually travel for the systemic circulation. We will pick up with the heart valves associated with those chambers on Wednesday.